You're listening the Virtual CISO podcast, providing the best insight on information security and security IT advice to business leaders everywhere.
Hey there, and welcome to yet another episode of the Virtual CISO podcast. With you, as always, John Verry, your host. And with me today, Aviv Grafi, and I hopefully said that right. Hey, Aviv.
Hey, John. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Did I get that right? Aviv, is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Correct.
Excellent. So I always like to start the conversation simple. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what is it that you do every day.
I'm the CTO and founder of Votiro, cybersecurity industry for 2 decades. Actually, before it was called the cyber security, it was called IT security, and before that, it was just network security. So I'm for about 20 years in the industry, and I founded Votiro several years ago in order to combat a very special type of attacks. In terms of my background, as I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel, I was a high school kind of security geek, and then I went to IDF and I worked in the Then, of course, as you know, as everyone here, I worked for a couple of startups, and then I founded what now is being called Votiro.
Excellent. What's your drink of choice?
So actually, my drink of choice is called Arak. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. That's a local anise kind of drink, which is very unique to the Mediterranean.
You're the first person who's given me that answer in 140 episodes, and now I want to go out and buy a bottle of Arak. Is it like is it more like a digestive, more in that Campari, Ouzo, Sambuca, Fernet Branca kind of space?
Yeah, it's very similar to Ouzo, I would say, yeah.
All right, so now I have to find out. Arak, A-R-A-K?
Exactly.
All right, well, it's now on my shopping list because I love digestives, the Camparis and the Amaros and the things of that nature of the world. So I'll be looking for that. Thank you. So I think it would be fair to say that files are foundational to not only computing, but of course, hence for running a business. I think it's also fair to say that files are unfortunately foundational to any cyber attack. So let's start pretty simple. How does a malicious individual use different types of files, both to incent behavior and or take malicious action in an environment?
If I could just, control the content and send that, for example, to my insurer, to my insurance company, I can send that to a colleague. I can send that to my doctor. I can send that to my car dealer as like a driver license copy. In fact, as a bad guy, you can see tons of opportunities in every organization. Now, if you think about what it's the most simple kind of thing, like convincing someone to do something, but the more actually they in that document, it's actually embedding a malicious code, can execute whatever he wants to do on the target machines.
Yeah, so and I think we know that email these days, social engineering, is a predominant vector of attack. People don't think of emails as being files, but they are effectively files, right? So that first file that they send you is an email, which incents you to open up a document or to navigate to a website that's going to download a document, correct?
Right. Even the an attachment like a Word document or Excel spreadsheet and download it off the web, like browse to a website, but not just email and downloads. If you think about sharing like Box and Dropbox and OneDrive, those file sharing and collaboration platforms use now. So maybe we started like 10, 15, 20 years ago, security primary channels or vectors like email and web downloads, but today we have tons of other document exchange platforms and tools that we probably overlooking it.
Yeah, so good. Let's talk about that. So we know attacks are file centric. We know that incidents and cyber attacks are just perpetually going up. So we can reason that the things that we've been doing to this point haven't worked all that well. So I'm going to oversimplify this here, and I'll focus a little bit on social engineering attacks, being that they're the predominant vehicle. We've traditionally used a handful of different techniques to prevent these files from creating problems. So let's talk about each a little bit, and you can tell us what works well and maybe what works not so well. So first in, like if we're talking about something coming in through mail, right? We've traditionally tried to do some level of mail filtering, right? We're trying to, let's say, prevent the file from getting to somebody. Where are we at with mail filtering? Does that work, not work? What's the good and bads?
Yeah. So actually, you mentioned two things that I want to, is that mail detect the malicious file. We know that it the malicious document so filtering should be able to block and to detect and block malicious documents. So it's not like a feasible thing. I miss quite a lot. So this is one. The second thing is that email filtering introduce some productivity issue, which we all call it like junk folder, right? I mean, all of us knows, hey, I sent you the but then labeled as malicious. I need to get that file. So email filtering for security, but also for a lot of businesses. Even if you think about the simplest method, blinding email filtering is just let's password protected the attachment. If you password protect the attachment, the email filtering can do nothing, cannot really look into that document, and then it just go through. So email filtering doesn't really work. Eventually, what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think what you're implying with the mail filtering is that most of the mail filtering uses like antivirus, recognized files, right? So they've got a hash of a file. So that's what you were saying, that it's hard to keep up with the variance of these files, because if the hashes don't match, much like an AV, then hey, we don't think this is a malicious file.
Correct. Yeah. And even introducing like a more kind of advanced technique like sandboxing. Sandboxing is actually try to detect bad behavior, saying, okay, I can detect it by saying this is similar to something we know, or just a new variant that the AI hasn't been learned that yet.
Gotcha. So then the next thing that we typically try to do is we try to educate you, right? So the mail filter didn't catch it, it gets through. So what we're trying to do at that point is prevent that from being opened and downloading something onto the desktop. Security awareness education and phishing, yeah, I think they have limited value, right?
Yeah, I think the awareness campaigns that we all, we went through those, and especially in medium and big organizations. In fact, the idea is we cannot have the technology to stop those malicious documents. So let's have our users try to detect and stop those malicious attacks. And the poor user cannot really find those things. I mean, definitely in the AI era, there are no more grammar mistakes and things that actually you can suspect. And on top of that, even a day or an hour after a successful phishing awareness campaign, just send an email to the organization, say, hey, there was a problem wiring your paycheck, you need to fill in the attached form, right? Or hey, this is your new floor sitting plan starting from next week. I want to know where I'm going to sit, right? So eventually you can be tricked. So that's why because of detection technology has failed. Now at some point we said, okay, let's have the user that maybe they're more intelligent to play that spot the phishing game.
Yeah, I would say, look, you need a layered approach to security
Correct.
fundamentally, and I think I'm not suggesting that cyber awareness education or social engineering, phishing exercises shouldn't be done, but even in the best run organizations, we typically see phish rates of 3-4% is kind of the lowest that you're going to see, which means that 4% of the malicious emails hitting someone's desktop, somebody's going to click on. So we know we need to go beyond that. So the next thing we typically do, right, is is focused around like something on the desktop, like antivirus or endpoint protection of something, which is okay. Well, someone did click on an email, and now we have a bad file on our desktop. Let's block it. Let's disable it. What works? What doesn't work there?
Yeah, so that worked for quite some time. I think that it is definitely a best practice to have an endpoint protection service like either AV, EDR. I think the issue is that usually it generates tons of false positives and alerts. We see a lot of organizations, the prospects that we're talking with, they said, look, we cannot cope with the number of alerts, and they cannot really apply a real remediation or response activities, because they cannot really just plug that endpoint from the network because of the high false positives rate, and then they're trying to fix it after the fact, after they actually already infected the machine, which at this point it's possible, but if you can find a solution that we can actually avoid infecting the machine and potentially stealing some data, you should actually go for it. And with the EDR and definitely with antiviruses, this wasn't the case because of the high rate of alerts and the inability to really remediate in real time.
Yeah, and then last, of course, is we need good vulnerability and configuration management. So everything failed to that point. The AV didn't detect the file. The file's loose. The file's actually on the desktop. But if we have the desktop properly configured, we can, and we have all of our applications patched, and maybe it's a malicious PDF file, and maybe we've got the most recent version of Adobe that's not vulnerable to it, and perhaps we're not running as local admin. Thoughts there?
So that's definitely one of the, I think, the best practices I could also recommend. Definitely work with the up-to-date machine and up-to-date applications, and definitely with the least privileged kind of approach whenever possible. Nevertheless, we know how difficult it is to really release patches and deploy patches on time. And there's always a window. Sometimes it's days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months until this patch getting really pushed. And we know that the bad guys are, they're faster than us. So they're actually generating those malicious documents, hours after the vulnerability, get published. So while this is the best approach, this is really, I think, the most kind of complex to manage. And as the organization get bigger, it's even getting more complex because no one wants to be blamed for patch that was pushed that took down the IT. No one wants to do that, right? They will lose their job in a second.
Yeah, and then, we can continue on, right? And then there's network segregation so that if something does start propagating, we're minimizing the scope of it. So it's interesting to me, we started under the premise that malicious activity is often file-based, but yet we've kind of talked through a typical stack, and very little of that focus is actually on files. So I get the feeling you're going to tell me that's why Votiro is a file-focused company.
Right. So before I started Votiro, I was doing pen testing. I was actually doing audits and security audits, and I was traveling around the world and interviewing IT staff and checking system configuration. And after 3 or 4 or 5 days of doing those interviews, usually I was showing the report and also demonstrating how it could hack my client. And usually there was one technique, as we talked earlier, is just sending a weaponized resume to the HR recruiting department, saying, "Hey, I want to apply to a position in your company. I know John very, and I would love to work for you guys." And on the other side, there is a guy or lady that need to do their job. They need to scan hundreds of resumes, sometimes every day or week, and they need to open those. So we cannot tell them, think twice. Maybe that's a malicious actor. And I think that's the fundamental of where the problem with the security solutions today, because there is a fine balance between security and productivity. As I mentioned, try to push patch too early, maybe that's risky. Let your user spot the phishing, but maybe you will get their work even more complicated and lengthy. So that's where we all started, that I saw that you can actually, using a malicious document, you can hack almost every organization because they need those documents for the day-to-day job. And we described that security stack with tons of things, and there was one thing that I thought that worth solving, which is allowing organization to be productive while keeping them safe. And this actually can be achieved through protecting from malicious documents.
So you've been doing this a long time. I've been doing this a long time, and to me, cybersecurity is sort of an endless game of cops and robbers, right? As a new technology emerges, and we're looking at how we're going to use this technology on a positive way, the bad guys are saying, okay, how can we use this in a malicious way? And as we get better at protecting one type of attack, so back in the day, most attacks were network based. And then we got better at patch and configuration management, vulnerability management. So then they went to the applications, and then we got better at application security, and then they went to social engineering. And we're still not good enough at social engineering that they haven't gone away from that yet. I think the one constant through this is this concept of a malicious file. So what types of, let's talk about the types of attacks, right? We have, I think, the traditional malicious file attacks, which are the Word docs, I'll call them Office docs, right? And PDFs, I think, and script files and things of that nature. I don't think most people are aware of how many different file types can cause a problem. So talk a little bit about that, and then beyond that, let's talk about what are some of the emerging attack vectors that you're seeing.
Great. So first, there are tons of file types. In fact, we in Votiro, we understood the problem of that endless game of cops and robbers, and that's why we're taking a different approach of how to protect from malicious documents. And remember that HR guy or lady that need to scan resumes over there. Instead of, they're interested in the content, right? They want to see Aviv's resume, his job experience, what he want to do and stuff like that, his qualifications, and not necessarily in the actual bits of the document where this is actually the vulnerability resides. So the idea behind Votiro, and we called it content disarm and reconstruction technology, is that by taking that PDF resume and regenerating a safe version of that PDF by taking all the well-known elements like text, like pages, paragraphs, picture, and just regenerating that on a safe template of a PDF, we can deliver a safe version, 100% safe, right? Because we just regenerated it to the user in real time. And then we can tell, we're actually telling our customers, and we're telling the end users, open any document you receive, because that's a regenerated document which actually resolve that problem of cops and robbers, because we're not trying to chase the bad thing. We know what are the good things in a document, and then we regenerate a safe version of that document. And this is the idea in terms of how we actually break that game. So this is, of course, I think what stands behind Votiro, and then we apply that for all those kind of channels or vectors that you've mentioned, like email, web downloads, and of course, also we integrated with Teams and Slack and Box and Dropbox. So every document an organization receives actually goes through that technology that generate a safe version of the document, which looks and feels exactly the same, delivered to the user in real time, as opposed to Sandbox or some other technologies that takes time. And of course, that's close to 100% because we're just generating replicas of the document. And we could achieve that by leveraging multiple technologies. You've mentioned like social engineering. So of course, you can actually lure the user to open a document, but it's not like the same original document because it does not contain the malicious macro, does not contain the malicious script, because we already took care of that. So that's the idea behind Votiro, and that's how we actually breaking that game.
Interesting, a very different approach. A couple questions for you. So does that mean that there is a defined group of file types that you're working with? So as an example, right, we talked about Word documents, we talked about Excel documents, we talked about PDFs. What about batch files or text files or SCR script files? And like is there a defined list of things that you guys can look at, and as I understand it, it's almost like an ETL process, right? What you're actually doing is you're opening up the document, you're analyzing its components, and what you're doing is then only translating that to a second document with the known good components, right? The safe components in it. So from my perspective, I see the same document that I would have seen, but anything that could have been bad in the document can no longer be in there, correct?
Correct. Exactly. You described that correctly, and that's what we do for tons of file types. I mean, we mapped all file types used in business today. Like we talk about Office files, like Word, Excel, PowerPoints, Visio, images files, PDFs, RDFs, also embedded objects. If you think about embedding Visio within Word document, we're doing that for archives. We're doing that for even planning, like CAD files, AutoCAD files. So almost every file type is being used, like almost the 180 file types we support today. And for those, if there is a file type that we do not support, of course, we have a policy to address that in the product. But basically, more than 99% of the documents used in business today, we know how to process those exactly as you mentioned, because we know how they built. We know how the specification defined the structure, and that's how we actually learned about how to solve that problem.
Gotcha. So you use the term, just to differentiate, you use the term documents as opposed to using the term files,
Correct.
right? So I would assume that means that something which is intended to be human readable, would be quote unquote a document. Something which is machine readable, quote unquote, would not be a document. So as an example, an executable file, a binary, a DLL, those types of files would not be files that Votiro would be processing. Is that correct?
Correct. Content design and reconstruction, focusing on human readable content, but also in some ways some machine readable content like XML files and stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, JSON, XML,
Yeah.
They're sort of they kind of cross over between
Yeah.
machine. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, but to be honest, when we talk about that with the customers and prospects, they're saying, yeah, but I don't want to have DLLs or executables in my, transferred in my Teams or Slack channel anyway. So we're allowing them to block it or to integrate with their existing security stack for executables if they want to do that for certain users. But most of them saying, I'm not expecting to get any executables on Slack. So if you can just block it, the executable, that will be fine, allowing all the documents, the human readable content, to be secured and transferred safely. I'm fine.
Gotcha. And where do you sit? So are you sitting on desktops? Are you sitting on servers? Like where is your software sitting, and how does it get triggered when a file is being uploaded, downloaded, accessed, whatever the trigger events are?
So Votiro is a cloud-based solution. So we have our cloud, Votiro Cloud, which all our processing is being done, and then we connect using a native API to, for example, Office 365 or Teams API or Slack API. We connect that cloud-to-cloud integration. So we triggered whenever a new document or file is being sent to you or being sent by you. That's the trigger for us, and then we process that in near real time. Of course, we do have a flavor for desktop, so in the form of browser plugin. So if you want to protect, for example, downloads that actually gets before they get to the browser, we do support that as well. So it's either cloud or endpoint in the form of a browser plugin.
Gotcha. And then I would assume you have the same challenge that most tools do, that like you mentioned, a password protected and encrypted file, unless you have the decryption key, that you really can't, I would assume you can't view and or reconstruct, a document. Do you support any type of way where, as an option, someone would be able to transfer you that password, and then you would be able to do the same thing, and then would you be able to reprotect it with the same password?
Yeah, exactly that. Actually, one of the things we introduced as part of the product, that's a workflow. So once we find a password protected document or archive, we then notify the user saying, hey, if you're expecting one, just type in the password here, and then we decrypt it. We doing all that magic of reconstructing and regenerating the document, and then sharing it with the user in the same way. For example, that's email. He gets a password protected email, but just the safe version of that email. With exact same look and feel. So yeah, I think we have one of the first solutions actually to introduce workflow for password protected and encrypted content. As we saw that, as we mentioned, traditional security system are just being just blind because they cannot treat any encrypted content, and usually the IT security, they have two options: either to allow all the encrypted content just get to the endpoint, and then they have security risk, or just to block everything, and then they have a productivity risk, because eventually, as we see a lot of documents being encrypted, especially PDFs, my PDF got blocked, so I need to call the IT help desk. Hey, I need to have my encrypted PDF. With Votiro, we introduced that automatic and self-service workflow to support those kind of use cases.
Interesting. So I'm assuming you're one of those rare companies that probably doesn't have to promote the fact that they're using AI in any way, because it would seem to me that you don't need AI. All you really need to do is know what is, you need to have a definition of a file structure from the vendor of that file format. And then really what you're just doing is stripping out anything which, according to that file structure, doesn't belong there.
Yeah, so when we started, that's for sure, we didn't use AI. It was mainly we followed the specifications, and that's how we generated saved documents. Now, but we on the last 18 months, we introduced AI, and for those areas that we
You just did it for marketing. Come on, Aviv. You're just doing that for marketing.
yeah, actually, yeah, marketing asks we have to get AI into the product.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, but the way we use the AI is to distinguish between in that specific problem of Office macros. Office macros, that's actually a code. It's not a structure of
that's
a
true.
document, right? So the alternative was just to strip off all those macros out of the documents. And when we got to a financial organization, told us, look, guys, that's really cute, but you cannot really strip out all those macros. We need to have them for our work. So, and that's where we thought how we could solve it. And AI actually was very handy there, because with AI, we could really analyze the macro code and say, yes, this is a legit macro, as we trained a model, and say, yes, that's how you can actually recognize a macro that interacts with the disk or network, or just a macro that manipulates tables or maybe formulas and charts in Excel spreadsheet. So in fact, AI was helping us tremendously in solving the Office macros challenge, which turned to be a big thing when we started to work with big financial organizations.
Yeah, if you think about how much, it's remarkable how much financial analysis takes place in spreadsheets in organizations.
Yeah.
It's nuts. So that's actually interesting. So, from a machine learning perspective, right, you give it thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of files with macros embedded in them. We identify which of those macros, the AI is able to determine which of those macros are taking an action that we've defined as being potentially risky. Like you said, interacting with the disk, interacting with the network, things of that nature. And as long as I would assume, as long as a macro is focused on, just manipulating data within a worksheet, you're looking at that and going, okay, that should be safe.
Yeah, in fact, we trained our model to detect benign macros, not necessarily just malicious macros. I think that's the whole concept about Votiro's technology, that we trying to look on the good stuff, not the bad stuff in a document. So by training the model how a legitimate macro and benign macro looks like, we were able to really expedite and really boost the work of detecting good and benign macros. So that was to say, okay, yeah, it's high confident that this is a benign macros, and then we keep that macro attached to the Excel spreadsheet. And of course, as I mentioned, as you described, yeah, we could also say, yeah, this is not a legit macro, because you see it does something with a disk. It's more intelligent than that, because thanks to the AI, it's not just a binary decision. So it's not like a static analysis that it used to be like 5 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So a macro that's simply saving a copy of the data.
Exactly.
It is interacting with the disk, but that's likely a benign file, where a macro that would be doing something else with the network stack is probably not.
Correct.
Okay. Makes complete sense. Anything else in terms of like sort of evolving? Like, I'm amazed the cleverness of the bad guys, and like you said, like these using Box, using SharePoint, using Dropbox. I mean, the variations are endless, right?
Yeah, that's for sure, because the number of channels and the way the communication platforms increased dramatically over the last 5 or 10 years, definitely in the post-COVID era. So we got used to share things like, virtually. So we got tons of new platforms, and talking and sharing documents via Box, Dropbox, Slack, Teams, SharePoint is just got way easier. So we saw significant increase in the number of attacks being carried by those kind of what was previously as a niche platforms. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What about like other attack vectors? Like, I'm just thinking about places where I'm exchanging files with people today that I wasn't even thinking about 3 years ago, 5 years ago. Like, so project management tools. Like, we use a project management tool called Rike. Rike has the ability to like exchange files through Rike. What about things like Jira and Confluence? All of these are applications that you might be helping organizations validate that those files that are being shared are secure?
Yeah, actually, if you think about any application that you can actually share documents, usually they have an API. So we have,
Mhm.
for those who we do not support yet, like in the official connector, we have Vatura API, so you can integrate almost any platform with Vatura protection. And on top of that, if you think about large companies that are going digital, they're allowing their customers to do some stuff online, right? Upload their, as part of a know your customer process, upload documents, right? Asking for a loan. Do some stuff online, which involve uploading documents to a client-facing portal. We see a lot of use cases where companies saying, we're allowing clients to upload stuff. We have no clue what they upload, and then we store it on our S3 bucket in AWS. So we actually helping customers to integrate Vatura API with their applications, and on top of that, we're providing also a native security for AWS S3 bucket for every file that lands there. So the number of possible integrations is endless. I haven't talked yet about Salesforce and some other integrations that we integrated with. Almost every application that involve files, Vatura actually is there to make sure that it's being sanitized before it reaches the end user.
Okay, so at the end of the day, if an application has an API that generates an event that's associated with a file being placed somewhere, you have the ability to, that can be programmatically set up to communicate that file to your cloud, and your cloud will reconstruct the document and put it back in place
Exactly.
for
And
you.
that process takes milliseconds. I haven't mentioned that, but because it's a deterministic process, not trying to wait for the file to do something, not trying to query a huge, AI model, that takes milliseconds. And that, I think, the benefit of using such an approach, which is fast and deterministic, so you can get a safe file within like 200 milliseconds for a typical document, and you can have actually your employees and users actually do whatever they want and work, and not necessarily deal with security constraints.
Gotcha. Any have you guys dealt with the issue? Is there a workaround to like legal issues with, documents, typically a document's hashed and we know that's the exact copy and I'm signing that exact copy. Obviously, a legal document can have something malicious in it. Has there been a mechanism by which that would be an actually interesting question. Can someone, rather than when I get the file, right, you're reconstructing it, could I upload a file to you and then have it be quote unquote Votiro validated, so that when someone downloaded it, they would know that it's gone through your engine, but yet the hashes would match, so that from a legal perspective, I'd still have
Yeah.
what we need?
So the way that we cope with the legal question is that we storing the original documents for amount of time that can be configurable, obviously, but more than a year. So you can always fetch the original. If for any reason you want to fetch the original, you can always fetch it. And if you talk about digitally signed documents, we know how to reconstruct a digital signature and say, yeah, this was originally signed by John. It was re-signed by Vatira after we validated John's signature. So in fact, we can actually help users to double check that it was actually being signed originally by John, and then reconstruct it.
Okay, so I still think my approach is
Yeah,
better, and I just expect like a 10%
of
tithing from
course.
this point forward.
Yeah, you may
No,
if you want a
all kidding
product
aside,
team,
though.
join a product team, and
No. Actually, but I do really like that idea, right? Can you imagine? Can you imagine that I could, upload a file to your engine. You would translate that back down, and then I could send that to somebody saying, "Hey, it's Votiro validated."
Yeah.
Right. So even if you don't, if the person receiving it doesn't have Votiro, they still get that validation that this document is clean.
Yeah. So it's like a watermark, or be able to check it against.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like it would be like it would be cool to sort of become the Xerox of validated
Yes.
documents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. Like I said,
I like that
you know,
term, the Xerox of the
so
validation.
so so look, you should end up in a 300-400 foot yacht at some point based on that idea. I'm not going to ask for a lot, maybe 30-40 foot,
Yeah.
you know,
And don't
something.
forget the bottle of arak.
A bottle? Are you that
Bottle,
cheap?
a bottle.
Ideas of that nature. I mean, those are
I'm gonna,
cases.
yeah.
That's a case idea. That's not a bottle idea,
You're
Avi.
gonna get a distillery. Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I want a distillery. All righty. I think we beat this up pretty good. Any last thoughts? Anything we missed?
No, one last thing. I mean, one of the things that we launched just recently is another addition to the product. So we're not just generating threat-free documents. Now we also know how to look into documents and tell the users and the CISO if they have a PII or PCI or PHI in those documents. So not just that we delivering threat-free, but also PII-free, because we now know how to mask and redact private information. So it's actually the organization gets two protection. One is the malware protection. The second is the legal kind of thing if they're getting private information leaked or getting into the organization.
Instead of just masking it or redacting it, can you leave it in there, but just let me know, like, so that my data classification mechanisms work?
Of course. This is an option in the product. We start from detect only, and then the customer say, "Oh, that works. Okay, now I want to redact for certain users, for example."
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That's got a lot of value. I mean, especially as we move into the world of GDPR, CCPA, and now 15 state standards in the U.S. and how many across the globe. I mean, we have one client that deals with this issue, and I think we're up to like 61 different standards in their privacy program we help them support, which is just
Wow.
yeah, it's just nuts. All right, man, this has been fun. I appreciate it. If somebody listening thought, hey, this is pretty cool stuff, how would they get in touch with you and Votiro?
So Votiro.com, that's the easiest way to schedule a meeting with one of our specialists. And of course, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Aviv Grafi, and I would love to hear your feedback, love to hear your thoughts. I think that's at least my primary way to learn the market. I want to have feedback and field users just sharing their thoughts. That's the best way to do that.
Sounds cool, man. Thank you again. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you jumping on. It's what, your 6 hours difference or something like
Yeah,
that?
now it's 6 p.m. in Tel Aviv. Yeah, that's.
All right. Well, go have some dinner.